Every tech startup hits bumps in the road. That's part of the journey. And for my gig, I knew ahead of time what some of these obstacles would be, like fundraising. But I was unaware of the silent killer of my tech startup, lurking in the shadows. It was subtle but lethal, and it'll drag you down too if you're not aware of it. I'll tell you about my experience, help you spot the killer, and give you top tips on keeping it at bay. Okay, so I've got my great business idea. There's a clear market for it, and I'm ready to get cracking. So, what's one of the first things I did? Well, I started mapping my network. Everyone from my practical professional links to my university connections, to my family and to my friends. I even told my granny about it. I actually really did. And as I started spreading the word about my shiny new startup and looked to map my network and start mining it, I found myself quickly running up against an unexpected problem. And that was how to manage the relationships with all these different people. Now, don't get me wrong. At first, it was pretty exciting and genuinely rewarding telling everybody about my business idea. I actually really enjoyed it because somehow it sort of felt like each conversation was propelling the business forward. And the mission of the business, it felt important, and I felt sincere and genuine exhilaration driving it onwards. And really, everyone was interested and everyone was curious. And loads of people had awesome advice for me, and still plenty of others very generously offered a true ton of support. Things started really well. But as the business started to encounter turbulence, I found it increasingly burdensome having to manage all of these relationships that I'd somehow inadvertently put into play. So I'll explain that further. Think of handling these relationships like juggling balls in the air, but it's not just one juggling act because each relationship has its own dynamics and its own special factors. I had, for example, my fledgling startup team. Each person is now, in effect, a ball I needed to juggle. Am I keeping that person engaged? Are they still enthusiastic about the project? Or maybe they're getting a bit fatigued and losing faith. Maybe they're looking to jump ship. And then, of course, I had my prospective funders to handle, all of my advisors. And in a way, everyone that I told became a kind of a juggling act that I needed to keep handling up in the air, dealing with those relationships, handling those expectations, maintaining their enthusiasm, and helping everyone to keep focus and driving forward to the ultimate outcome, which was, of course, the launching of my viable business. And yes, this is where your friends and family come in. Often the most genuinely enthusiastic supporters are your friends and family. Of course they would be. And while they were no doubt a very positive force, I really want to emphasize that, it still presented me with the possibility of disappointing them. I mean, who wants to disappoint their best friends and their family? Who wants to disappoint their dear old granny? And I really don't say that in jest. It represented real pressure. And now think of this over a timeline. Juggling balls for 6 months? No problem. I could do that with my eyes closed. But over a 2 to 3 year long runway, it really does become very demanding. Now, hold on for a sec to that mental image of multiple juggling acts happening simultaneously. You have to think about this over a long time frame. Startups have predictable stages which manifest over a timeline. No one expects your little Johnny to be riding his bike when he's like 1 or 2 years old. But like a worried parent, if your little Johnny still can't ride his bike by the time he's 10, you're getting concerned. You know what? So is everyone around you, all your friends and family looking on. And I found that the same applies to the startup. If you're not hitting those milestones, I could tell people around me were starting to get nervous for me, and I was getting nervous watching them watch me. Meanwhile, I'm having to juggle all of these balls in the air, and it really was starting to become a lot of work and a lot of effort. Meanwhile, in the background, the silent killer is gaining strength. I found that my silent killer was crafty and subtle, and it was dragging me down for way longer than I realized without me even knowing it. Think of it as like rust accumulating on your business. At first, your business is shiny and new and it looks really great. But then after a while, you look at it, some of the shine is worn off. It's maybe looking a bit dull in places. And over time, you look again, and you know what? You're seeing unmistakable signs of ugly old rust. There is a problem. So what is the silent killer? Well, the silent killer is delays. Yes, delays. And I define a delay as any established expectation of something happening that does not happen or does not happen quickly enough. And these delays in your startup can be anything and everything, from a funding opportunity that falls through or a key hire that never materializes, through to a whole series of R&D hurdles. But in my experience, the granddaddy of all of my delays was the simple but corrosive issue of people not responding to me. Yes, it's the guy who says, hey, I'll give you a call next week and give you an update, but he doesn't call. And this can be someone maybe promising to connect you, someone offering feedback, someone suggesting they've got key investment needs that never actually materialize. And you will never know how endemic poor communication has become in the world or feel the sharpness of its pain until you try to launch a startup and you're depending on this communication. Delays, I promise you, are the silent killer because they often occur in relatively subtle ways. Maybe they're even happening without you fully even knowing it. And they might even be happening with your blessing, with your approval. Yes, it is like your business is slowly rusting. I found them to be socially and professionally impactful on my reputation. It really stung. Believe me, this has a cumulative effect as it becomes more and more apparent that you're missing those milestones. Delays caused me planning dislocation, and they impacted my team's momentum, slowly dragging me and the team down. But I found the most damaging part is that they are emotionally taxing. Each delay meant I had to figure out what the problem was and how to handle it. Navigating the whens and the hows of the follow-up was like a hellish Wagnerian opera where I was tossed by emotions of impatience waiting for the reply, to confusion, why aren't they coming back to me, to caution, maybe some concern, exasperation, and finally some kind of acceptance. And to make the silent killer problem worse, delays happen a lot, and as I've said, there's often not much you can really do about it. Like with the guy who says he'll call you next week, but he doesn't call. Well, you can't very well say at the time, no, I insist you give me your answer right now. That's because people often have perfectly legitimate reasons for delays, even one that may ultimately benefit you. Maybe they need to inquire about a detail on your behalf, or maybe they need to speak to a third party. They're making some kind of an introduction. Let me illustrate this for you in a slightly longer example. I have a very dear friend who is a real mover and shaker in the industry my company was entering. This person is close enough to me that he'd come to my house for barbecues. He'd give my kids birthday presents. He has this incredible network of contacts, and I've seen him referenced at conferences and in industry publications. So when he agreed to open his network to me, I was pretty bowled over. I was really pleased and kind of excited about it. He told me he'd work hard to open up a bunch of doors for me, just what I was looking for. But he just needed to go on this 2-week holiday. As soon as he was back, we'd get cracking. Things all seemed totally credible and a great opportunity, so I lined up my team members to take full advantage of this drive. I also explained the opportunity to my investors and my advisors, and of course to my friends. I was really excited about it. First delay happened. That was the 2 weeks waiting for his holiday to complete. After that, I heard nothing from him, so I assumed he was getting back into work and maybe had a bunch of emails he had to sort out. Now, week 3, it's getting a little bit awkward. I sent a follow-up. I hadn't heard back from him. Now, here's where it gets kind of problematic. You don't want to be a stalker. The guy's doing you a favor, so there's only so much nudging you can do. I waited for another 3 weeks, actually starting to feel genuinely concerned about my friend's well-being, so I reached out again. Still no reply. Long story short, I finally heard back from him 5.5 months later. For crying out loud, 5.5 months. He was apologetic, and he said he'd come back to heaps of work and some family stuff. There's not much I can do about it. It was a tremendous waste of time, and I felt a sharp impact on our momentum. But the real kicker was having to explain it all to my friends and to my investors and my team and my supporters. It was kind of galling and honestly sort of embarrassing. Worse, the person's kind offer of support was so key and he appeared so reliable, I hadn't really established an immediate plan B on outreach. I mean, it's just not that easy to find an alternative to a major industry figure like that, so I was kind of left floundering. I also felt it reflected poorly on me and it reflected poorly on the business. Would people be thinking he didn't follow through because he didn't believe in the viability of what we were aiming to achieve? Maybe he thought something was wrong and just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So there was a material impact on our development progress, and there was a notable impact on our morale and reputation. Now, I give you this detailed example because even if it's not of this magnitude for your startup will still experience a very great many series of delays. And here's where my multiple juggling acts across my professional and social networks come in. Every delay exacerbated pressure because of its practical impact on the business and on my morale. But this then radiated and was amplified across the network I felt accountable to. An obvious example was my honest proclamation of when I was going to launch my business. When an entire year had passed and I was still not off the ground, when I told people that I would be, it started to be a real drag. Again, it's the rust I was telling you about. And if you think it's bad having to explain this when people ask you about it, wait until they no longer bother to ask you. Wow, that is a punch in the stomach. So what can you do about this? Well, this is what helped me. Number one, high grade your network. Be really thoughtful about who you reveal your startup to. Spread the word through your network, but do it with care. I prioritize people offering practical help. And if I was to do this again, I'd reveal my plans only to my closest friends and family. I just wouldn't spread the word that wide. The fact was, every time even my kindly neighbor asked me about my progress, I kind of felt the squeeze. Avoid single points of failure. Now, this is obvious, but you don't always have a lot of choice. I mean, how many business A-listers do you actually really know? Most people are lucky to know even one. Although I tried not to, I ended up hinging my success on too few people. One thing that worked for me was to have a super direct set of conversations with these people. Leave nothing implied. Leave nothing misunderstood. Don't infer anything. Don't allow for any room of confusion. And instead, be bold and clear in setting expectations. For example, dates where you are looking for a result. It can feel kind of awkward when you're doing that, but you won't regret it. And honestly, your network will appreciate it too because they know where they stand. Recognize your network as human. I learned to better anticipate all the reasons why delays could occur so I could manage my expectations and build in more resilience. Some people will just change their mind after they speak to you. Maybe they don't want to burn a favor in helping you after all. Perhaps the next day they really can't be bothered. They might forget or misunderstand your expectations. People are people, so they get sick, they have families, they have babies, they go on holiday, they are forgetful from time to time. And most of all, my A-level priority is probably their C-level priority, so it's just not that important to them. They've got their own lives to run, their own businesses that they're focusing on. Remember that the easiest thing for busy people to do is to do nothing at all. It's a really important piece of advice I want to give you. Downweight the good news you think you're hearing. Most people are good folk and they genuinely want to support you, at least in spirit. Keep your expectations measured with your network. I quickly learned not to be too bullish, too excited, or too confident when updating the people I was communicating with. It's just kind of embarrassing when you are so pumped up about something and it doesn't materialize. So never promise something you aren't 100% sure you can deliver. Remember that it's way better to exceed expectations after making moderated promises than to deliver disappointing results on highfalutin over-the-top promises. Oh, and one more thing. Never try to give specific dates if you can avoid it, because otherwise you're locking yourself down and there's really no gain. Space out your updates. I updated my key stakeholders only when I needed to, maybe roughly about once a quarter, and I avoided fluff updates that waste their time and mine. and it gave the impression that nothing much was progressing. I found I didn't wear out my network nearly as fast by doing it that way. Keep many irons in the fire. Above all, I learned to have many irons in the fire all at once. If you have a lot of activity going on, then a setback here and there kind of gets lost in an otherwise good news story. So for example, if you say that a key expected hire didn't join after all, and you've had a major R&D breakthrough and you've got additional funding, then that actually doesn't sound so bad. And it's way better doing that than just having that piece of bad news dangling out there all by itself. It's really awkward and you can feel the pain of that silence. I hope you found this useful, and if you've got any questions, please do drop them into the comments in the chat below, and I'll do my best to answer them. If you like this topic, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing. It's really super helpful to me, and it allows me to keep creating content like this for you. See you on the next video. Cheers, mate.